Good. Well, thanks very much for joining us this morning. My name is Edward Donald. I work for UKTI as an e-commerce specialist, and my colleague Neil Tunbridge is e-marketplace specialist. And today what we're going to walk through is the e-exporting program overview, and this summarizes UKTI's offer to UK retailers, and for context gives a global perspective on some key trends that we've been able to analyze, and also frames some of the commercial results that we've achieved to date, and also we will talk about some of the opportunities that UKTI has negotiated specifically with e-marketplaces around the globe. So just to kick off, some of the key trends that are affecting consumer behavior around the globe, and I think probably the key element to stress in this slide is A, if you're looking at export markets, traditionally you might have looked at things like population size, concentration in urban environments, maybe GDP, gross domestic product. And what we suggest now is that you look at things like internet coverage, usage of smartphones, and how connected consumers are in those marketplaces. And the reason is that where we see the infrastructure coming together with the availability of smart devices, we see a peak in consumer spending. So smartphones, 4G, or very fast Wi-Fi connection, and looking ahead wearable technology, all of those elements build out a landscape where the consumer can shop and can search on their own terms rather than having to go in store.
I guess the takeaway from that is that what this slide and the next few slides are really about the what and the how and the why of this program, but also explaining now that it's a very different contextualized market in which we're trying to help organizations sell. So hence, as Ed was saying, it's about looking at smartphone penetration, it's about looking at the connected consumer and really understanding how people are engaging with brands, importantly overseas and on the marketplaces that we'll talk about in a bit.
And the reason why this is so important is that whereas all retail transactions roughly hover around the 10% mark, be they in the UK, be they Europe, what we are seeing increasingly from areas like China and the wider Asian region is that purchases are moving to in the region of 50% across mobile device, and notably using e-marketplaces. So the key message here is if e-marketplaces are not part of your consideration for exporting, they need to become that. It's the fastest moving channel, and it's the one that gives you national reach in all the geographies that you may be considering. What this therefore talks to is a very different approach to how you might retail, and importantly, the sort of export model that you could be considering.
Essentially what this also means is that it's a different route to market, and it's a much lower cost market entry strategy by delivering your products into an e-marketplace. The traditional route to market would have been quite a long, engaged, drawn-out process where you'll be looking at either distribution partners or franchise partners. Traditionally, offline retail models also then involve the need to acquire retail stores. Those retail stores are expensive to fit out. You need to put a lot of stock in them. The rents on those retail stores are often very expensive as well. What this really does then is turn the traditional market entry strategy on its head. You have a low-cost entry model. You've got a marketplace that's done all the heavy lifting for you already. They have a significant number of connected consumers using their platform already, and you also have more traditionally a significant grouping of peer group brands through which you can then access these customers as well. So really just turning that model entirely on its head.
So because it's a new model, what this program delivers is a set of products which are designed to help companies optimize their approach. And there are three key strands to this. The one is we're talking about a world now where there's fundamentally far more choice, A, about how you go into a market, B, how you go about accessing a particular consumer group, and thirdly, how you monitor the return on investment of your activity. So under the mission statement of accelerating global growth through online channels, what this program is about is lifting the UK retail industry into the e-commerce space. And this is for small, medium, and large companies. And the key driver behind this whole program is the first product that we're talking about here on the left, number one, which is an e-marketplace navigator. And what this does through UKTI is give us the ability to see all the business-to-consumer marketplaces across the globe, understand their commission rates, understand what categories they're performing best in, understand from an overall perspective the traffic numbers that they are driving. And with the ability to see this entire landscape, British retailers can now make very qualified decisions about A, what market they might want to go into, and therefore which platform best addresses the consumer group in that given market.
Just to take that a bit further then, if you remember Ed's point about looking at different data sets, what we're trying to help industry understand here is that a new market entry strategy now really leans on communication and data. And the fact that we have ability to access all of the data around these 400 or circa 400 marketplaces around the world gives us the innate ability to have a very data-led approach to helping organisations access and enter new markets.
So the second point then is around what we call the e-expertise bank. And it's really built off the same fundamental thought that if on the one hand UKTI is giving companies tremendous visibility of the opportunity that's available across the globe or in a given region or in a given geography, it therefore stands to reason that UKTI needs to also show the companies the different steps they need to adopt if they're moving into cross-border trade using e-commerce as opposed to using a traditional distributor or agent or franchise-led model. So this e-expertise bank does two things fundamentally. On a country-by-country basis, what it does is lay out the different operational steps a company needs to consider when it's thinking of exporting. So just to break that down a little bit, if it's China that we're talking about, then it would be about shipping to China, it would be about your legal considerations before you enter China, it would be about which e-marketplace to consider for China, it would then be about how you activate your digital media and your social media in China, how you receive your money back from China, and how you deal with returns from China. So roughly speaking, 7 steps. Those 7 steps won't be the same for Australia, nor will they be the same for Germany. So what this e-expertise bank will do is basically break out all those steps so everyone can have visibility of what is required. This in turn will enable companies to pinpoint the suppliers that they need to help them through each of those steps. And that's very, very important because what this means is that companies are effectively buying the services of a very different set of supplier companies. And therefore, the role of this expertise bank is to give British companies a qualified view of some of the best or the innovative providers in this digital services area so that they can help companies export in the most efficient way possible.
I guess just to summarise that, it's an information-led expertise bank. So at any point in the stage, irrespective of whatever geography, or market that you're looking to go in, there will be someone that can pinpoint the precise process that you need to take in order to alleviate whatever hurdles are in the way.
So turning now to point number 3, digital advisors. I'll just pause here to reset the situation insofar as that at the moment UKTI has 350 international trade advisors across the United Kingdom. There are sister organisations in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, and the international trade advisors are a service that is provided by UKTI free to British businesses to help them understand how to plan a business from a domestic perspective, and secondly put it on a secure footing ready to take it abroad. And holding that thought, therefore, of these advisors already being out there and it being a free service, the digital advisors are a supplementary team who will come in alongside those international trade advisors specifically to talk about 2 things. One is migrating a business model to take into account an e-commerce channel, and secondly, how to use digital communications, so YouTube, Pinterest, Twitter, Instagram, all those channels that are available, how to use them to give global reach to the marketing activities of UK retailers. Because the key thing is that as companies go abroad, what they need to do is begin to consider, A, how they talk to an audience out there, but also how they retain that audience and build presence within that audience's day-to-day lives.
Just to back that up, it's also about understanding the fundamentals of how specific markets operate, so that we know in Asia and specifically in China, social commerce, so selling through social media channels is hugely important and is really driving a lot of the e-commerce sales that's happening over there. That's not so the case in Germany, that's not so the case in Brazil. So the digital advisors will offer specific expertise and knowledge to around the different markets and marketplaces that we're working with.
So moving on to point 4, you've seen a lot of branding with the word great today. And what that talks to is the fact that the government has a branding campaign called Great. And Great, if you're in France or in Japan or in China, you would increasingly see activity, communications activity, which would say food is great or fashion is great. And they are UKTI and the government's communication framework to promote British companies abroad in those given categories, be they fashion, food and drink, luxury retail, motor industry, so on and so forth.
Or e-exporting.
Or e-exporting, absolutely. And they take the form not only of advertising but also weeks where UKTI takes groups of British companies into countries like Japan, China, Malaysia, Mexico. And the purpose of those weeks is to create an environment where British companies can have, for example, 20 meetings with companies, buyers, that they would otherwise take perhaps a year or 2 years to A, create, and B, attend and convert. So what they are is a means of the government accelerating the access that British companies has to buyers abroad in these markets. Now the key thing is that historically those great weeks and great festivals have been about British brands meeting department store buyers or franchise owners and that type of thing. Wind forward to now, and they are all about British brands meeting both physical retail buyers and e-marketplace buyers. So what will happen is, if you go to Japan in October, where there's a great week, you'll meet the department stores on Ginza, which is the equivalent of Regent Street. But you will also meet Japan's top 4 platforms, for example. So if you are interested in going on a great week, please do contact UKTI specifically about that program, because they are a way of really catapulting a company in front of the right sort of buyer group that you want to get hold of.
Yeah, not much to add to that. I guess it's just to summarise, a real fast-track accelerator program, as Ed said, to get in front of the right organisations and the right, in this case, the right marketplaces. Marketplaces are also vertically driven, so that they operate on single categories. They're also multi-category driven as well, and some are dealing specifically with certain types of products. So, as Ed said, it might take you a year or 2 years to get in touch with the right organisations, understand what they sell, and then ultimately meet and talk to the right person managing your specific brand or product. In this instance, we can put you directly in front of the 4 leading marketplace digital marketplaces in Japan, and really accelerate those conversations that you wouldn't otherwise have the ability to do so quickly.
So if we then look to point number 5, using the knowledge that we have from the navigator that we have in place, what we have begun to do is initiate discussions and agreements with a number of e-marketplaces around the globe. The most public of which is Tmall in China, and we'll come on to refer to that a little bit later on. But really the key point about this is that for UKTI to offer British retailers a genuine enabling effect, what we are putting in place is terms and also offers which sometimes are non-financial but have a value-related proposition to them, whereby British retailers can be placed onto these platforms faster, along with lots of other British retail brands, so that they arrive at the biggest splash into that marketplace. And that collective energy, that collective consumer interest in those British brands helps accelerate the traction that they get in the marketplace. We can't give all the detail at the moment, but if you have an international trade advisor, please do contact them about this program. If you don't have an international trade advisor, please follow our Twitter feed that you'll see at the end here for more detail on those topics. So we'll just round out now talking very briefly about point number 6, which is that going back to the sort of products that the International Trade Advisor offers for free or for voucher payment, there are certain products that already exist which will fall in now under this e-exporting program, one of which is called Passport to Export. For those of you hearing this for the first time, this is a preparation product that takes a company that's been performing very well domestically in the UK and takes it through the steps to basically audit what it needs to do to begin to move overseas. And the key variation now is that where that might have been before about attending trade shows and finding a distributor, this product will now also say, how do you locate the best e-marketplaces to go on, for example. So this slide really talks about the wider suite of products that are available across government. And the reason that we wanted to share this slide is that you'll begin to see a lot of activity coming out across the autumn and early spring period, all of which is designed to either help British companies domestically improve business performance or do so when abroad. So I'll just talk about two areas here in particular. One is UK export finance. This as it stands, is a product that was originally set up to help companies, for example, access and create bank accounts abroad and enable them to set up a commercial presence so they could begin to trade. Under the umbrella of the e-exporting program, products like that will be increasingly adjusted to reflect the digital age that we're all trading in. So those of you who are familiar with the term API is a piece of software which basically links your warehouse with what the e-marketplace is wanting to sell. We would anticipate that finance and the sort of support that's been available in the past will also gradually move into the area of facilitating technology solutions for British companies. It has to enable British companies to take advantage of cross-border trade.
So all of the examples that we gave earlier on around the e-expertise bank and the players that sit within that e-expertise bank, ultimately the steps that are required in order to get onto a marketplace, and there are, as we said earlier, multiple different steps across different markets. The ability to be able to leverage the knowledge within the expertise bank, and also maybe the technical requirements and the technical changes that might need to happen to your business, will be falling under, as Ed mentioned, under the sort of umbrella term of e-exporting.
So we'll talk now about really the scale and the scope of what UKTI is, and therefore what it can make available to British companies. And the key words here are the network that it offers, the breadth of what that offer is, and also the connectivity that it offers. So we'll now walk this through as a flow. But effectively, it starts with the consumer here in the bottom right-hand corner. So we know, UKTI knows the e-marketplaces, and it also knows the number of consumers that are visiting those e-marketplaces every day. So UKTI can help put you into that consumer grouping.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. Not only does it start with the consumers, it also ends with the consumers as well. So we probably should have another arrow that goes all the way back around and feeds into the back of it. But by understanding the consumer demand on the marketplaces, the data that we're getting from the marketplaces and feeding into that navigator model that Ed was talking about earlier on, it almost comes full circle, because we can feed that back into our network. Anyone want to have a dance? We can feed that back into our network and then understand precisely the types of brands, the price points and the peer groups of brands that the customers that are online and doing a lot of the shopping online, we can backfill the pent-up demand that's coming through these marketplaces.
And part of us being able to do this is driven by three things. Post is actually an internal term at UKTI for the teams in the embassies. And there are 3,000 employees of UKTI across the globe in the embassies that are part of Her Majesty's government, all of whom are in there to do a job to help British companies export. So for those of you who contact the embassies, you're probably talking to people like the commercial officer or the head of trade and investment. If you're new to that environment, then and you want to know who to ask, then you ask for the commercial officer, the commercial lead in a given embassy of where you're looking to target. Sorry, what's that?
Other government.
Oh, right, sorry. So then, sitting alongside the embassy team, UKTI sits in a wider group, which is BIS, which is Dr. Vince Cable's department, and other government departments. So hopefully what you're beginning to see is that this organisation, UKTI, is part of probably one of the most sophisticated networks that you get around the globe. And it's been working pretty well for getting on for sort of 550 years. So please, please do avail yourselves of the services. So that's the abroad, that's the part that's abroad, that's the part that is in the embassies and the consulates general. And perhaps now we talk about the internal network that we have in the UK that you can plug into here.
So as Ed mentioned earlier on, we have 350 international trade advisors that sit across the UK. The UK is then broken up into 9 regions, and each of the regions then have specific category knowledge. There are specific retail trade advisors and also trade advisors that specialise in other areas as well. As Ed mentioned earlier on, they will be supplemented by the digital advisors that will be giving specific digital knowledge into the marketplaces around the world that we're working with. As we mentioned earlier, that's well over 400. And the knowledge that will be disseminated out of London and out of the ITA network will then obviously be fed directly into the client companies that they work to. That we're aware of, there are 360,000 SMEs within the UK that are digitally switched on and in some capacity or other already exporting. Sitting behind those are another 250,000 organisations that we realise need it with a little push can then also move into that category as well. So we're looking at 500,000 SMEs that in the very near future will be digitally switched on in both senses of the word and also then exporting overseas.
So the key thing here is that if you think back to that box there that talked about the marketplace, the navigator that UKTI has is effectively the brain that sits behind our ability to matchmake a UK retailer or a UK brand with a given marketplace. And the key thing here is that these marketplaces aren't just a sales channel, but they're fundamentally it's fundamentally about an audience aggregator. So the profile of the consumer coming through that e-marketplace is very important. The sort of trends, the behaviors that we can see from the data are very important. And once we know the profile of the consumer that the retailer or the brand wants, we can then bring as close a possible fit to the sort of e-marketplace that's most appropriate for them. Therefore, when we look at the speed to market and the amount of time that a company can dedicate to this, it significantly reduces the management time that may otherwise be involved in going abroad to find a distributor, booking flight tickets, so on and so forth.
If you look at the flip side of that relationship, and if you remember back to one of the slides that we spoke about earlier on, and we've got it here, we keep referring to this as being a data-led approach. So as Ed mentioned, that we can talk to organisations and then we can push them into the appropriate marketplaces, but we can also look at the other side of the relationship and understand precisely the type of customers that are shopping on marketplaces. We can look at their shopping behaviour, the items they're buying, the items they're searching, and then we can take that data and drive it back into our industry and network here in the UK and make sure that we are matching a precise fit of UK organisations and brands and retailers into the appropriate marketplaces and pushing those organisations and putting them in front of the appropriate customers as well.
So this then talks to the fact that from a return on investment perspective, what we have done is we've looked very carefully at who this could be appropriate to, because UKTI is for everybody, and fundamentally we believe that the availability of e-marketplaces and cross-border trade ultimately democratizes the opportunity in a far more far-reaching way than trade has perhaps been possible until maybe 20 years ago and the arrival of e-commerce. So what we have here is 364,000 online and already exporting companies. So these are the people who've already begun the journey, and they're the people who we can help just sort of nudge and lift a little bit further on. And the reason why this should be so attractive is that there are 2.8 billion people projected to be online, or who were online by the end of 2013. And we've done some stats. We've had a little bit of fun with them, and we've looked at, for example, how many births there will be around the globe versus how many new smartphone owners there will be in China and India this year. And there are actually going to be 5 times more new smartphone owners and users in India and China than there are global births. Yeah, I just want to give you that as a figure in terms of the scale and also the sort of opportunity that's presented for everyone.
Which gets back to what we were mentioning earlier on, that actually it's understanding how people are shopping and how they're using the new digital technology to communicate with you and to buy your products.
So going back to the point there about fundamentally a shrinking of the globe, and that's been talked about many, many times by quite a few experts over recent years. What we just wanted to try and do with this map, in a very simplified way, is just try to show for you the regions of the globe where there are some very, very, very big players, but also try to emphasize to you how, sitting in your offices in the United Kingdom, you can begin to look across that horizon and say, if my Google Analytics is showing that I've got a little bit of interest in Germany, I actually know that I could go through maybe Amazon or eBay into Germany. Equally, you could be looking at Australia because you've got some interest off your blog, and therefore you could have a legitimate reason to follow up with that interest and begin to offer a presence via an e-marketplace in Australia. So this is by no means a perfect map, but in a way it's about trying to condense the opportunity down to the fact that it's very, 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 very easy to do the sort of things that we're advocating.
Yeah, I'd just add to that the reverse of looking at the globe becoming smaller is that it's equally as easy for you to become a much more globalised organisation out of the UK, which harks back to this being a very data-led approach. By simply looking at the stats that are either coming through your site, on your blog, or how people are communicating with you through social media, you can very easily understand and target new countries.
So therefore, continuing the theme of return on investment, government is putting a lot of resource into helping British companies export. That's not just financial resource, it's time. There are a lot of assets. So I mentioned earlier on these things called Great Weeks. They take place normally either in or very close to the embassies overseas. And they're all great calling cards in the global economy. For example, the embassy in Tokyo, where the Great Week takes place, is probably one of the top 5 addresses that any Japanese business would want to come and visit. So as a British business going overseas through UKTI, you can come under the wings of an organization that has some very, very unique shop window opportunities when engaging with buyers overseas. And that's the physical side of things. There's then the more commercial side of things, which is about the opportunities that UKTI is negotiating. And we have a memorandum of understanding, which is basically a commercial agreement between government and a corporate entity already in place with Tmall in China. And for those of you who aren't familiar, Tmall is the business-to-consumer e-marketplace, which sits under the Alibaba group, who are about to float in New York. I'm sure you've seen all the press coverage for that.
I think it's only going to be 150 billion.
Yeah. So ring up your pension advisor and suggest he invests. The really key thing about these memorandum of understanding is that from an internal perspective within government, they galvanize the organization and enable decisions to be made more swiftly, and for the focus of the organization to be put against certain activities. And I'm sure you can understand that focus across government is a hard act to juggle. So these things act to drive these programs through the organization. From a UK retail perspective, what they do is cut the amount of time it takes to negotiate terms, cut the amount of time that maybe it takes to onboard onto a platform, and importantly, what it does is it takes brands onto a platform more swiftly.
Yeah, I guess the easy way to understand them is they're a fast-track process of red tape in whatever market or geography you're looking to enter.
And so with the energy that they create, what we've been able to see in the last 6 to 9 months is a range of brands going into China, and we know for a fact that some of them have been able to considerably accelerate their decision-making process off the back of this activity. And whilst the key call-out in the context of the MOU is that you have 18 new retail brands on that particular platform since the beginning of November, the offshoot of that is that actually even more brands have gone onto ASOS China, and also in order to explore the highly segmented and targeted nature of e-commerce in China, another 6 have gone on to variously a luxury platform, a food and drink platform, and a health and beauty platform. So really what this builds back to is that key organizing thought that with a global view of all the e-marketplaces, UK retailers and UK brands have an opportunity to cherry pick the choice of the audience and the platform that they go up against. And hopefully we'll begin to see even more interest growing in China, off the back of this program, but also off the back of the sort of case studies that we're being able to generate from the success we're seeing.
So, sorry, something that Ed mentioned earlier on about having a great address. It reminded me of a comment that might be the best piece of PR that we've received, and depending on how you interpret it, also the worst piece of PR we've received. Someone was in our office the other day and said that the way that UKTI can help my business means that ultimately you're the best kept secret in the world, which, as I say, means either we're very good at doing our job and or very poor at communicating how good we are at doing it.
And so this slide is just a quick recap, really, of some of the marketplaces that we're busy talking to, and there are others who we are actively in negotiation and conversations with. But it's really about the global reach of this opportunity, and we really want to stress that, but at the same time, encourage you to have the sort of discipline to say, okay, if that's all that's there, what is my web analytics saying to me? What are my blogs saying to me? Where is my audience as it stands today? And therefore, how can I optimize that existing sales potential by then using an e-marketplace to target them?
Yeah, I would just add to that, this is far from being an exhaustive list. We keep referring to over 400 marketplaces, and I think we probably have about 12 on here. But what we've tried to do, as Ed said, is just demonstrate the geographic scope of the relationships that we have either already developed with significant conversations around putting in place an MOU, or the very deep understanding we have around the financial and commercial operational an operational setup of these marketplaces. Here we have marketplaces from China, in the Middle East, South America, Pan-European, America. So it's just a very quick snapshot of the geographies that we're working in.
So what's our homework for you? I didn't ask any questions on this particular session, but I think there are sort of 3 core fundamentals here. The first is that under the gov.uk/exporting tag, you can find information relating to this program, and I would suggest it's an ongoing destination that it would be a good idea to check regularly, because that is a cross-government URL. So in other words, anything to do with this program and associated programs will all be streamlined and streamed through that particular destination. So if later on this autumn, broadband vouchers, which are being made available, are something that you want, that's the place to go and find out about them. Equally, that's the place to go and find, for example, new content or that type of thing that we're putting out. Secondly, there's the email address which comes directly into our team in London, and we will cycle through those questions and either try to answer them ourselves or find the most appropriate ways of doing so. And last but not least, please do follow, and if it's appropriate, retweet any of the activity that you see on our Twitter feed. Because whilst to date we've been in a situation pre-launch where we have been having to hold some of this information back, we now want to actively use Twitter to recruit people into the different programs, different opportunities that fit under this program.
For those of you at Twitter, the hashtag is e-exporting, little e, big E.
That's right. And what we'd also draw your attention to is the fact that more and more content and more discussion will be being surfaced through the LinkedIn group, and also more and more content will become available on our YouTube channel. And this content isn't just from companies who've been there, done it, and shown success. It's also going to be the likes of the search engines around the globe talking about what categories consumers are looking for in, say, Japan or South Korea. It's going to be about the social media platforms in in, for example, China, talking about the trends that they're seeing and how British companies need to be alert to those trends when they are beginning to select the agencies to represent them in those markets. So the overall drive is to create a toolkit of content that companies can refer to either pre-market entry or to supplement their their already existing understanding of the conditions that they're looking to navigate.